Well, hello there. My name is not Paula White. You might be looking for Paula at this time because she usually has a live stream at this time of day, and yet she's not here. She's traveling this week, and she asked me if I would fill in for her. And so I've got a really great interview guest to talk to here in just a few minutes. But quick intro on me. My name is Kris Kelso. I'm a friend of Paula's, a fellow professional speaker. We met through this great organization called Heroic Public Speaking, and I've been getting to know Paula over the last couple of years. And both of us have been on a journey writing books and speaking to audiences and consulting with companies. And so that's been a lot of fun. And so I'm your host today. And I'm just going to tell you straight up front, this is my first time doing this. This is my very first time hosting. I've been a guest a few times on live streams and webinars and things like that, but I'm the host today. I have the controls. And so this is going to be a lot of fun. You know, when Paula asked me if I would host her show and kind of take over and run things for the day, a friend of mine came to mind immediately to ask to be my guest. And so I'm going to introduce a man named Mark Kenny. I'm going to go ahead and bring Mark into the show here. Mark is a leadership consultant and a fellow author and speaker. He lives in the Nashville, Tennessee area, which is where I live, so we're close. We get to actually bump into each other occasionally. But Mark and I have done similar work over the years and run into each other quite a bit, and we've really built a mutual respect and professional friendship together. And Mark, the other day, you and I were talking, and you mentioned this idea of embracing forward change together. And the phrasing of that kind of caught my ear. And I said, man, I want to dig into that a little bit. And I think I immediately said, I think that's a great idea for us to talk about on Paula's show when we're together in a few days or a week, whenever that was. So I would love to unpack this idea a little bit, but really quickly, give us a 30-second intro of you and the work that you do, Mark.
Well, thank you, Kris. And you look a little different than Paula. So
yes, I do. I look a little bit different. I'm dressed a little different than her style today, but it's going to be fun.
Well, I work with executive and leadership teams to help them embrace forward change and get their organizations working together, heading in the same direction. So like you, I primarily do that through keynoting, and also I do strategic offsites. And that's primarily what I do.
Awesome. So this idea of embracing forward change, there's a lot of change going on. We've been through a season of massive change. I know I've seen a ton of change, not only in the marketplace, the workplace, in my personal life, in social circles. There's been it seems like we've just been inundated with change. And somebody recently, I heard someone say, change is the only constant anymore.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
The only thing that doesn't seem to change is just that there's always change going on. So what are you seeing that brought up this idea of embracing forward change together? What's happening that caused you to start thinking and talking about that with your clients?
Well, Kris, some of that terminology I've used more recently, but I was thinking back as we were talking the other day, and even back before the pandemic, back when I was in software, I think you were in technology as well. And
yes,
I
was.
remember like organizations that were trying to change and couldn't change. And that kind of started a journey for like, why do some organizations excel at this? And why do they not excel at this? And I remember one in particular where we were implementing some software for this government agency. It was over 700 people and implemented the software based on their goals. And it turns out one of the departments already had a piece of software that did almost the same thing. And so there's just a little example of the disconnect between different departments, or they were actually called directorates, and how they work together. And I remember the leader being so frustrated and like literally asking me, like, why is this so difficult, Mark? Like, why can't we just get everybody to work together? So that's really what started for me, Kris. And then, like you said, in these last few years, I mean, it's constant change, it's volatility. And I think the way that the organizations that are thriving in it or are doing well with it are ones that are embracing it together instead of everyone moving in a different direction.
So that's really interesting what you just said, because I can hear people watching this broadcast saying, okay, yeah, change is happening, change is going on, and lots of people are working on lots of things and they're not always coordinated. And okay, that's been going on for a while. What's different now? Where is the real problem? What are we seeing that's creating an issue that we need to be addressing? In other words, what's changed about change? What's different today?
Well, there's a couple things in what you said. One is I don't know that the problem has changed necessarily. I think it's been exacerbated. Like we had hard
Hmm.
times working together before, but I think some of the stress and pressure and volatility of these last couple of years, especially, has just really made that become apparent. Um,
Interesting.
and we see some things like I think we see some outworkings, not just of that, but also certainly there's some things like how we lead and how we treat employees and all that. And so we have these problems that we're trying to fix, like retention and workplace shortages and burnout and so forth. But I still just think if we can't learn how to work together and be heading in the same direction, then I think a lot of those efforts are going to just feel like an exercise in futility.
Hmm. So it's not so much that change is new, it's that the effects of the change, or the downsides, the potential downsides of that change, are getting worse, are getting more exacerbated because of all that we've been through with the pandemic and the economic changes with inflation and things that are happening. Sort of the environmental changes are exacerbating the effects of our internal change. Is that what you're saying?
I think so. There's just, I mean, maybe you can relate to this and tell me if you've seen this too, where it just feels like we're filling this glass with more and more stress and
Mm,
frustrations, and wherever that's coming from, with how we're being led, or confusion as to where the organization is going, or
yeah.
just frustrated because I'm being asked to do something. And I'm thinking of a workshop I did this summer where with middle managers, so not teams in this case. And I remember like the frustration of, like, I need to go get this information and get people's buy-in in different divisions or different departments, and I just, like, we're on a totally different page, and like I've had it.
Mm,
Like, so
yeah.
I think it's all of the above, that it's just like, what's the point if we're not pursuing something together and there's all these other frustrations, then what am I doing? What's
Yeah.
the point of this?
I'm reminded as you're speaking of this idea that if our stress level, just because of the environment, the political situation, the economic situation, the pandemic, I mean, all the stuff we've been through over the last few years, if our stress level, our baseline stress level, is already at a 6 or a 7 because of these things, then something in the organization, something within a team, something like you just described of, I need to go get some information from that other department and communication is challenging, that should be a 2 or a 3, sort of piles on to that 6 or 7 and becomes a 9 or 10, right? That things feel more difficult than they are, and the stress feels like it's piled on because we're already starting at a baseline stress. Like the entire world is under a level of stress and anxiety for the last several years that has just become this new normal that we build on. So maybe that's a part of
Yes.
what we're seeing, is that it's everything feels more painful than it is, or than it would be under normal circumstances, whatever that is.
I think you're right, but let's also not forget that I think there was a lot of stress before the pandemic and before all of
Hmm.
this. I mean, there was a
Yeah.
lot of stress and burnout back then, but obviously the last couple of years have just made that
Yeah.
go up to here. So I think it's, are we solving the right problem? Let's make sure we're solving the right problem.
So let's talk about that. What are the negative effects that you're really seeing? All right. So people are getting stressed and they're experiencing more anxiety, and maybe these changes that happen or work that we have to do to interact across departments is more difficult and painful than it has been in the past, or than it feels like it should be. What does that do? What's the downside, and how is that really hurting us?
Well, when you ask that, I mean, the obvious answer is we've heard all this stuff about the Great Resignation
Mm,
and people leaving.
yeah.
So obviously that's an obvious answer, but I'm thinking there's a friend of mine, actually another fellow speaker, Kara Soletto, and I saw, some of her research and work is on, guess what's happening now? We have directors and manager levels that are now thinking of or leaving because of it. So I think that's part of it.
Mm,
And the obvious answer is that there's a change going on because it's frustrating, especially with people that really want, like the folks that really want to get something done. Like they're there not just to do a job, but they're there to make a difference, make an impact in the organization. Maybe they
yeah.
grasp onto the organization's mission or what it's trying to accomplish or what they told it was trying to be accomplished. Well, if I can't do that, then again, I want to find something that's meaningful and fulfilling.
Mm,
So I think Kara's right in the sense that we're starting to and are going to see folks at a higher level exiting because of it. I think that's one thing
wow.
that's going to be an obvious outcome of that, or a natural outcome of that.
It seems like this great resignation, the great shuffle that some people have called it, is if that starts to move up the chain and you see a lot of management turnover and leadership turnover, then that's going to create even more chaos, isn't it? It's going to exacerbate some of these issues even further because
Mhm.
now the leadership is unstable.
Yeah.
That's
And
concerning.
the other thing that comes to mind, Chris, is we're organization had so much work to do, so many strategic priorities and
Yeah.
projects. Well, a lot of organizations now have less people, or two-thirds of the people, or whatever it is.
Mm,
But it's like we still can't resist the just that urge to do more, and
mm,
and to make, like, everything is important. Everything we've got to do. We've got
yeah.
to do everything equally well, and that math equation just doesn't work. So it's just going to
Yeah.
exacerbate people's stress and frustration, and it
I
is.
remember I remember talking to a client of mine. This was probably 10, 12 years ago at least. But it was a company that had been through a lot of change, multiple mergers, acquisitions, a big corporate move, a bunch of things going on. And I was talking to one of the executives about change fatigue. And I think I just made that term up at the time. I don't know if I heard that from somebody else. Of course, a lot of the stuff that I say I've heard from
Mhm.
elsewhere and picked up from a lot of different sources of reading, etc. So I don't know where I got that, but in that moment, I said I see a lot of change fatigue going on here, and I think what this organization needs is for some things to stay the same for some period of time. Like people just need for the dust to settle a little bit before you have another big upheaval and another big change. So, are you seeing that, Mark? Is part of this we're experiencing a fatigue from all the change and the chaos and the uncertainty?
Yeah, certainly. I'll give you an example of what you just said from Friday. I was with the team on Friday,
Mm,
and they were a leadership team, but not the leadership team. So they were a
okay.
leadership team over like a division. And
Yeah.
one of the things they were saying is, we're trying to get really good at our work to serve our customers. In their case, they're funded by grants. And so they're like,
Mm.
we people keep applying for more and more grants. So we get more grants, which means more
Oh
work. And
wow.
it's like,
Yeah.
we we don't want to do that anymore. We just want to get really good at what we're doing and take a breath. But
Yeah.
there's just that urge to keep on doing more things. So I think, in answer to your
Mm.
question, yes, I think it's change fatigue, and also fatigue from just not being able to prioritize what's really important and what we're going to be good at.
Yeah. All right. So we spent a lot of time, Mark, talking about where the problems are and what's happening. What can be done, and specifically this idea of embracing forward change together and bringing unity that you
Mhm.
mentioned, and that I keyed on at the top of the conversation. What are you seeing as the possible solutions to solving this, and what are you recommending to some of the companies that you're working with?
I think there are a couple that are pretty simple, Chris. One is just thinking a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm thinking back to that leader when I was doing software that I talked to you about in the very beginning. He's like, why is this so frustrating? Like, why can't people work together? And so I think one thing is just to ask a different question. And the question would be, why should they work together? Like, of course, they're going to work on their own goals and priorities if there's not something that binds them together. So, what reason have you given for them to actually work together, to share information,
Mm.
to do projects together? Because the natural tendency is to just kind of focus on my own work. In fact, my book is about territorial thinking. Like we're just naturally territorial. Of course, we're going to focus on our own work because that's what we were hired to do. That's what you hired me to do. And I've got my own department goals and stresses. So why should I? So I think that's the first thing is just reframing that question and think of, well, if they're not working together, have I given everyone a reason to work together?
Hmm. Wow. So, how does a leader give those reasons to work together? If I'm seeing this in my organization, I'm recognizing this territorial thinking, and everybody's focused on what their priorities are, but
Mhm.
they're not necessarily working on a single common set of priorities. How do you solve that?
Well, two things come to mind. One is, and I'll give you a couple examples. Well, you know what? I'm going to give you an example from my that I use when I'm speaking quite a bit because it's kind of a fun example. Are you an astronomy? Um, I don't know what the word is
Certainly not
there.
an aficionado. No. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, a few years ago, I didn't realize this, but the closest black hole is so massive that you would need a telescope the diameter of the entire Earth in order to capture its image. Like I always thought we had
Wow.
images of black holes, but we don't. We didn't. We didn't have an image of a black hole. So what happened is a group of observatories from around the world, all across the globe, coordinated together and they took readings, they gathered information, they put them together, and they literally produced the first ever image of a black hole by working together.
Wow.
So I love that story because it demonstrates that we all need the first thing we need is an ambition to pursue together. We need something that's bold enough that's worth pursuing, big enough. I think this is really the key, big enough that we have to do it together. We can't
Hmm.
do it by ourselves. It's big enough we have to do it together, and it's simple enough that everyone can understand it. So, like an example would be one of the clients I worked with said that project management was going to be the strength of the company, and it was just so simple. But like they were literally going to do so well at projects that they would launch their company to another level. I was able to interview the
Wow.
CEO of Bridgestone not too long ago, and they not too long ago were all focused on being the most innovative company in their industry, so they wouldn't be a commodity, which is tires. So those are just a couple examples of something that we can all rally around. Everybody gets, and it takes everybody to do. So that's the first thing that
Hmm.
comes to mind is
All right, I
having
want
an.
to ask you about something because you just put up two criteria that seem really challenging to put together. You said it needs to be big enough that it requires everybody to work together, but it also needs to be really simple. So that it seems like something that big could easily get really, really complex. How do you create a big vision and a big goal like that, but also keep it really simple?
I think we overcomplicate it, Chris. Like I think we just need
Hmm.
to grasp onto that one thing eh, that is so simple that everybody gets. And maybe like I don't know about you, but for me, like my messaging, even in my speaking and stuff, naturally is so complicated. But usually there's just
Ooh.
really the
Yeah.
basic is there's just a simple idea of what I'm trying to get you to do and what I'm trying to
Yes.
achieve. And I think that's true in organizations. It's like we think we're supposed to come up with this big, long strategic plan with 37 priorities. And I'm not saying all that is, I'm not poo-pooing strategic planning. I'm just saying ultimately we're not going anywhere. So where do we really
Yeah.
want to be?
Yeah.
And I don't think it's really that complicated. Maybe it just takes a group of people getting together and saying, if we stay the same 5 years from now, this is what's going to happen.
Mm.
Where could we be in 5 years? Help me
Yeah.
figure out what that would be that we can all rally around.
I'm reminded of the quote, and I think it's been attributed to Thomas Jefferson, where he said, I would have written a shorter letter if I had more time.
That's
And
good.
and one of the things I tell my clients a lot is that it's easy to make things complicated and it's hard work to make things simple.
I love that.
And
Yes.
part of the job of leadership is to simplify. Like you just have to be relentlessly focused on simplifying things because things will not get naturally more simple in your organization. They will naturally evolve to be more complex. So I think that big vision, but making it simple, it is really hard. It is a big challenge and it's hard work and you have to put in the effort to do that.
Yeah, 100%. And I love what you said. I totally agree. If you're a leader, that's your job.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
nobody else can do it. That's your job to put in the work to make it that simple.
Yes. Yes. So assuming we can do this, assuming that an organization can create a simple goal and make it clear, make it big, compelling enough that everybody's got to be on board. It can't be accomplished by just one group or one department.
Mm-hmm.
Assuming they can do that, what's next? They've created that big vision and they've communicated it, but that doesn't mean everybody's automatically on board. How do you get everyone on board and how do you keep that momentum going, working towards embracing that change together, which is the key word in your phrase there, was embracing that positive change together?
Kris, that's a big question. And there's a lot to it, which is it takes some time to do that over time, because usually it's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back.
Yeah.
But let me give you one thing that I would say is kind of the next step to help that process and to cascade it down. And that is to pick 3 things, 3 anchors, three pillars, if you will. Joe Calloway talks about this. He's another speaker. Patrick
Yes.
Lencioni talks about 3 strategic anchors.
Yes.
So it's like we want to be good at everything, but what are the 3 things that we are going to be great at? And that everyone in the organization knows that, whatever our ambition is, let's say we want to be the most innovative company. If we're going to do that, we have got to be great at these 3 things. And everyone knows that. I mean, what's Southwest great at? They at least in the day, had 3 things.
Yes.
Low fares, loyal customers, on time. And everyone knew those things and everyone was empowered to do those things. And then that cascades down to the organization. Joe Calloway talks about cascading it. So everybody knows what their 3 things are to support the 3 things. And that is one way to, everything else. It's not even so much about, yes, let's do this, but so much as no, let's not do that, because it's not going to help us to be great at the 3 things. It's not going to help me sitting in this team in this department be great at my 3 things so that my department and the organization can be great at those 3 things so that we can achieve that big ambition together. So that would be one way. And really, that's not that difficult. That's a simple thing to start getting that going throughout an organization, and then start holding each other accountable and talking about making sure that everybody has those 3 things.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Love it. Well, Mark, we got a few more minutes here on this broadcast, and this has been really fun and interesting conversation. What would you say to a leader that's out there going, okay, this is all really interesting, but I'm in the chaos every day, and I would love to to get everybody aligned and do all those things, but I'm constantly just trying to survive the next day and put out the fires that are right in front of me. What do they need to do to start to turn the corner from, working in the business and firefighting and trying to manage the chaos to starting to think about implementing these kind of ideas that are really big and really simple, but simple is not easy.
That is true. That is true. And like you said, alluded to before, it takes time and effort for sure. And it can be
Yeah.
messy. Yeah. What comes to mind when you ask me that, Kris, is, I'm sitting in my office at home now, and on this side of the house,
Mm-hmm.
nobody on the street can see this side of the house.
Mm.
And we're not quite sure what to do with it. So it has a bunch of weeds, which means that I've got to go weed whack it every once in a while. And I hate weed whacking it, especially when it's hot. It's just messy and hot, and it's not even
Yeah.
flat. But what will happen is sometimes it'll get so thick and I'll try and go a little too fast. And so the weeds will get all tied up in the weed whacker.
Yes.
And I won't stop to clean it out because it's a pain to stop and clean it out. I just want to get the job done. So literally I am working at like 50% capacity trying to get the job done, where if I would just stop, take the 5 minutes to clean it out, I'd be going much faster, and I'd actually go much faster if I just slowed down to clean it up. I,
Wow.
I don't know any other way, Kris, than if we don't take some time to slow down and clean it up, then we're just whacking away at 50%, getting
Man.
frustrated. I don't know any other way to do it. We've got to take a step back so we can go faster eventually.
I love that analogy because I think it also sort of comes full circle to the beginning of our conversation of the change is just going to continue. The stuff that's happening and the rate of change is not slowing. And the problem is that if we just try to power through it, like your weed whacker trying to get through those weeds, if you just try to get it done, the problem is it's never ever done. It's like you're trying to power through a garden that is so big and it's growing so fast that by the time you get done with it, you have to turn around and keep going. And so to 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 allow yourself to go inefficiently and work slowly because you don't want to stop to clean out the weed whacker, as you said, or some people say sharpen the saw, right? To take the time to make your tools better and more efficient, you're only going to slow yourself down and the work is going to pile up. And I think it's an illusion that you can just power through it and get to the end because there's not an end to this kind of work.
That's right. That's right. And as you were saying that, Kris, I was thinking of something practical too. There was a leader that I interviewed for my book,
Mm.
and there was a part in time. It was a medical institute, and they had underwent a big change. They're moving into a new building, and so naturally there's going to be fires that pop up, and you got to put them out, and not literal
Yeah,
fires, of course.
right.
But their whole focus for a short period of time was to put away the matches. Like,
Mm.
not just put out the fires, but like, okay, what is causing this? And let's take care of what is ultimately causing the fires so that we can take a step back and really focus on this. So that's just something maybe practical that would help people just kind of take that next step and of
Yeah.
focus instead of constantly just firefighting.
Yeah. Yes. Very interesting. All right. Well, we got about 2 minutes left on here, Mark. You mentioned your book. You touched on it a couple times. I would love for you to just give our viewers and listeners a quick synopsis of what your book is about, and then follow that with the kind of work that you do and how people can engage with you if they'd like to.
Sure. Thank you, Kris. So my book is called The Hippo Solution, and I chose hippos because hippos are naturally territorial. So just
Mm.
talking about, of course, we're naturally going to focus on our own priorities and objectives. And I give 5 actions to basically bring people together
Yeah.
for organizations to pursue something together. So that's what it's about. Got a
Nice.
few stories in there. It was a lot of fun to write.
Yes,
And
I've read a few of your stories. There's some good ones.
and the work that I do, I love speaking to leadership meetings or conferences about this sort of topic. And I also love to do strategic team offsites that aren't just getting together and getting to know each other, but are really doing the work of how do we come together as a team? What are some things maybe that are uncomfortable that we need to, like, how do we actually become a team? And then what is important going forward? And there's a process I have for going through that. So those are the two of the primary things that I do.
Awesome. Well, man, thank you so much for joining me on this admittedly experimental endeavor as I took over Paula's show for her this week. And it's been fun figuring this out and hosting the show. And it's been really fun talking to you. I always enjoy our conversations.
Thank you, Kris. You too. And you did a great job with your first time.
Well, thanks. I'm an explorer and I'm learning as I go and having a good time with it. Thanks for being here, Mark.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
So that's going to do it for today. Thanks for watching. Paula will be back next week at her usual time and with her usual energy and her music and everything that she brings that I didn't quite bring to the show. But I really enjoyed being on here and hope you enjoyed our conversation with Mark. And I will see you around. Thanks.